This lesson's about learning to convert hours into minutes, but I'm going to do a little bit of a recap of what I did with the Year 3s today as well, because I think it's relevant, talking about the intervals of time. So, to start with, intervals of time are the bits that we split time into. Now, some of these we make up. As human beings we've decided on, and some of them we haven't got any choice in the matter. They just are what the universe has made for us. So, we don't choose how long a day is. A day is how long it takes our planet to turn around once. We can't affect that. We can't affect how long a year is. A year is how long it takes our planet to go around the sun. We have no choice over that. So how long a year is we can't choose. How many days it's split into, we can't choose. Even months, they're an odd one. A month is to do with the moon and the cycles of the moon around us. But the moon doesn't do it in a very good number. It takes 29 and a half days for a lunar cycle, for a lunar month. And 29 and a half doesn't go into 365, which is why we've had to fiddle around with them a little bit. So, how long a year is, it's not our choice. How many months you can split a year into isn't really our choice, and how many days you split a year into isn't our choice. But how many hours you split a day into, how many minutes you split an hour into, and how many seconds you split a minute into was a human choice. So why did we choose 12 and 60 and 60 when we do everything else in tens? It seems like a really weird thing to do. 60 is not it's not the easiest number in the world to work with. A 10 is so easy. You learn to count in tens very quickly. Learning to count in 60s, a bit trickier. Even if you know your sixes, they're not the easiest times table. So, why? If you're going to choose a number, why choose 60 and 12? Well, the main answer is because the Babylonians did. So, thousands and thousands of years ago, the Babylonians, who did a lot of the earliest maths that we know of, they used 60s, they counted in 60s, they copied it from the Sumerians, and they were counting in 60s 3,500 years BC. That's 5,600 and something years ago. People were already doing mathematics, and that's amazing. And they were doing it with base 60. Now, nowadays we use base 10. That means we count in tens before we go to our next column. We do that because we've got 10 fingers. It makes it easier. Much easier to teach a child to count on their fingers to 10 than it is to ask a child to count on his fingers to 60. They don't have 60 fingers. Now, at some point, someone did try and change time so that there were 10 hours in a day and 100 minutes in an hour to change the length of an hour and the length of a minute. The French tried it. It didn't catch on. Nobody liked it. Even after a few months, they gave up doing it, and it never caught on elsewhere. In fact, they tried twice. So we're stuck with this system. So why? Why do we keep on doing it? Well, the reason we do it is because 60 is actually a really good number. I mean, 12 is a good number, but so is 60. There's a lot more factors of 60. Do you remember when we did the factor bugs, where we drew a bug? We wrote a number in the middle, like 12, for example. And then around the outside, we wrote all of the different pairs of numbers that multiply up to make it. So, 1, 12, 2 6s, 3 4s, 4 3s. I think that's all 1s and 12, isn't it? It's in the 1s, 2s, 4s, not in the 5s. So there's 6s. 6, 2s. Or you can do it where you just write each one once. But there's lots of factors of 12. There's loads of factors of 60. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, 30 and 60. 60 is in all of those times tables, which means we can split 60 into all of those groups. 100 has actually got less. 100 is not as good at splitting up as 60. Now, we don't use all of those. When we're talking about time, if you think about what people tend to say to you, they tend to say to you, oh, you've got a minute to do that, or I'll see you in a minute. So we use multiples of 1 a lot. We don't tend to use 2 minutes. If you need a little bit of time, you might say, I'll see you in 5 minutes, or you'll say, I'll see you in a minute. We don't tend to say 2. We don't tend to say 3. We don't tend to say 4, unless we're being really specific, like cooking something in a microwave that really needs to be accurate. We do use 5s a lot. We don't use 6s a lot. but we do use tens a lot. We don't use 12s a lot for minutes, but we do use 15s, 20s, 30s and 60s. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different ways of grouping hours that we need to think about. Grouping minutes within an hour, sorry. So let's look at a clock. Here's a clock. That's what a clock looks like. And this is a children's clock, so around the outside it's got the 60 minutes. Yeah. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, and then 60 is back to 0. Okay. We use these all the time. So let's see how you split a clock up. Well, first of all, you can split a clock up into 60 pieces. It's probably the most common thing that we do. Well, it's not the most common, but it's the basic one. So I've drawn it as sort of a sliced up clock, like a sliced up pizza. You can cut a clock into 60-minute long pieces. That is 60 lots of 1 to see it as an array. You can cut a clock into 12 pieces. That is 12 groups of 5, because 12 fives makes 60. So here we've got 60 lots of 1 makes 60. Here we've got 12 lots of 5 minutes makes 60. There are 12 5-minute bits in an hour. We can cut them into 10-minute bits because there are 6 lots of 10. 6 times 10 is 60. There are 6 10-minute bits in an hour. We can cut a time. We can cut 60 into 4 bits because 4 lots of 15 make an hour. That's 60. 4 15-minute bits make 60. We can cut into 20s. We don't do this as often, but 3 lots of 20, that makes 60. And we can cut it into 2 groups. 2 lots of 30, 2 times 30. That one we do a lot. Now the ones we use the most are probably a minute. We do that a lot. You've got a minute to do this. I'll see you in a minute. I'll time you. You've got 1 minute to do this. We use 5 minutes a lot. We use 15 minutes a lot because that's a quarter. I'm sure you can see on this shape that is cut into quarters. 15 minutes is quarter of an hour. We use that one quite a lot. Sometimes we refer to it as 15 minutes and sometimes we refer to it as quarter of an hour, but it means 15 minutes. We don't use 20 as much. I've never heard anybody say, I'll see you in a third of an hour. It's what it is, but nobody ever says that. And then half an hour, we use that one all the time. You've got half an hour to do it. I'll see you in half an hour. Break time is going to be half an hour today. That's quite a common one. And you can see that is half. So I'm going to use this picture, this model, because it's very easy with this model to look at a half. Let's use a wider pen for this. Will that show up? No, it doesn't show up very well. Let's use this. I can cut in half down the middle. I can cut into quarters easily like that. Okay? So there's a quarter, 15 minutes, or there's a half, 30 minutes. The other thing we use is 3 quarters, which is 45. Now, here's these things that we can now count in. If we cut time into 1 whole hour, we know it's 60 minutes. That pen's not a good choice.
60 minutes. If we cut an hour in half, you get 30 minutes. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Half of an hour is 30 minutes. Those are the first two that you learn at school. Then we've got a quarter of an hour. So this is half an hour. This is 1 hour. This is a quarter of an hour. This is 5, 10, 15 minutes. And this one here is 45 minutes. It's 3/4 of an hour. 3/4 of an hour, that's 45 minutes. Now, you're year fours now. We need to do something a little bit more complicated than knowing that half an hour is 30 minutes and knowing that a quarter of an hour is 15 and 3/4 of an hour is 45. We need to be able to count in these things. Now, first of all, we need to be able to count in hours. Now, counting in hours is counting in 60s. Now, you don't know your 60 times tables, but you do know your 6 times tables. So, no hours is no minutes. 1 hour was like 6 minutes, but it's 10 times bigger, it's 60. 2 hours is like 2 sixes, which are 12, but 10 times bigger, it's 120 minutes. 3 hours are like 3 sixes, which are 18, but 10 times bigger, 180 minutes. 4 hours is like 24, which is 4 sixes, but 10 times bigger, 240. 5 hours is like 5 sixes, which is 30, but 10 times bigger, 300. And it keeps on going on like that. If you look at this bit on this side, it looks like the 6 times table, 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, 48, 54, 60, 66, 72, except they're all 10 times bigger because we're counting in 60s, not 6s. So 1 hour is 60 minutes, 2 hours is 120 minutes, 3 hours is 180 minutes, 4 hours is 240 minutes, 5 hours is 300 minutes, 6 hours is 360 minutes, 7 hours is 420 minutes, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Now, probably won't go much past about there in today's lesson, in actuality, but just so you can see, it does go on and on and on. So, if I gave you a piece of work and I said to you, how many minutes in 1 hour, like this one here, you'd say 1 hour equals 60 minutes. It's one jump of 60. Gets you to 60. So if that was one of your questions, and it may well be one of your questions, how many minutes in 1 hour? It's 60. What's this diagram here? Well, that's 2 hours. That's 2 60s. It's 60, and then it's another 60. What are 2 60s? It's like 2 sixes, 12, but 10 times bigger, 120. 2 hours or 120 minutes. Well, what's this diagram here? This is 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. 1, 2, 3, 4 hours. That's 0. 6D, 12, 120, 18, 180, 24, 240. Even though these are all jumps of 60, 4 of them gets us to 240. I do suggest you write your 6 times tables out on a piece of paper in your book or somewhere before you start this lesson if you don't know them off by heart, because it will really, really help. And it is good. We can count in full hours, but sometimes people don't do that. Sometimes people will say, I'll see you in an hour and a quarter, or I'll see you in 2.5 hours. And then you need to know how many minutes that is. So let's have a look at these diagrams. What's this first one? It's 1 hour and half an hour. It's one jump of 60, and then a half an hour, which we said is 30. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So what does that get you to? If you jumped 60 and then you've jumped 30, we can count on in 10, 60, 70, 80, 90. 3 more 10s. So an hour and a half is 90 minutes. What about this next one? That's 2.5 hours. That's a jump of 60. Another jump of 60. And then it's a jump of 30. Well, that gets us to 60. 260 to 120, because we know that. And then another 30, 120, 130, 140, 150. 150 minutes. So 60, 120, 130, 140, 150. 150 minutes. And then the last one on this page, 3 hours and a half. What are 3.5 hours? Well, it's a 60, another 60, and another 60, and then it's at 30 minutes. So it's 60, 60, 60, and a 30. What do you get if you add 60, 60, 60, and a 30? You get 60, 2 60s 120, 3 60s 180, and another 30, 180, 190, 200, 210. So 3.5 hours is 210 minutes. So to do this, you need to be able to count in 60s, which is counting in sixes, and then you need to be able to add 30. This is good if we only ever did half an hour, but as I said, quite often people will do quarter of an hour or 3/4 of an hour. So remember, a quarter of an hour is 15 minutes, and 3/4 of an hour is 45 minutes. So what's this first one? This first one is an hour and a quarter. It's 60 minutes and then 15 minutes. What do you get if you add 60 and 15? 5, 7. You get to 75. It's 75 minutes. And if you need to do a column addition, you can. I think most of you could probably add 15 to 60 in your head, but column addition, certainly to check it, doesn't hurt. The next one, this is an hour and 3/4. So an hour and 3/4 is 60 minutes, and then 3/4 of an hour we said is 45. So what is 60 add 45? 0 add 5 is 5, 6 and 4 is 10, 1 is 1. It's 105 minutes, and I must write minutes each time. If you just write min, it's important that we put our units in. What's our next one? It's 3 hours, 1, 2, 3 hour jumps, that's 60, 60, 60, and then it's a quarter of an hour jump, that's 15. So we'll start on 0. 60, 120, 180, 180 add 15. I'm running out of room here. 180 add 15. 5 and 0 is 5, 8 and 1 is 9, 1 is 1. It's 195 minutes. What's my next one? 2 hours, 45 minutes. 2 hours, 45 minutes. 60, 60, and a 45. Well, 160 is 60, 2 60s is 120, 120 add 45. 120 add 45. 5, 6, 1. 165 minutes. And then finally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, and then a quarter of an hour. 60, 60, 60, 60, 60, and 15. Well, the first 60 is 60, the second 60 is 120, then it's 180, then it's 240, then it's 300. What's 300 add 15? I am not doing that with column addition, it's 315. Okay, that is what this lesson is going to be today. I'm going to give you numbers of hours, or numbers of hours and quarters, or numbers of hours and halves, or numbers of hours and 3/4, and then you've got to tell me what that is in minutes. It might be written out with pictures like this. It might be written out just as a number sentence. And it might be a worded question like, I watch television for an hour and 3/4 of an hour. how many minutes have I been watching television for? And then you'd have to give me a worded answer. So that's how your work will change. It will step up between with pictures to without pictures to worded problems. But the principle will always be the same. And you can work it out by drawing a number line or doing a column addition. Or I'll give you a picture of this circle and you could count on it. There are many different ways of doing it. The important thing is you get to the right answer and you write that down. And if you do any working, you show it. But if you don't need any working, then obviously you don't need to show it. Okay? That first one you could probably do in your head. 60 minutes had 15 minutes. I know what that is. I'll write down the answer. If you've got any questions, just send us a message.